145 pounds. That's right. I haven't been 145 pounds since I was 12. But, yeah, 140. I'm gonna run with it. I'm going to run with 145. How is everybody today? Welcome to the Way Church. Yeah. Get excited like we didn't hear some awesome music today. Welcome to, there's going to be a lot of baseball analogies, and I didn't think about it until I was standing right there. We're live in Africa right now, and I don't know if they play baseball in Africa. So, I'm sorry if this goes over your head. But I am excited because I get to continue this series titled Called Up. It's an awesome series that whoever came up with that, idea behind it should get a raise. And I was serious. I was sitting there one day and I was, thinking. I was like, and it came to me in, the embodiment of a dove came and blessed me with the idea to do a series called Up. And we're talking about all the people who were called up by God. Not all of them, because there's a lot. But we're talking about certain people who were called up by God, called from the minors to the big leagues. Called from whatever life they were living beforehand, called up to, play on the main stage, to play in the bigs. And I got to talk about Samuel the first week, and Cody talked about, who did he talk about? Simon Peter last week. Did awesome. Don't tell him I forgot who he talked about. But all these people, they got called up to play, in the big leagues. And probably this last couple of weeks, I've been planning on talking about Rahab. And Rahab was a prostitute in Jericho. And she got called up in amazing ways. And she did all this phenomenal stuff. She's the person who hid the spies of the people of Israel when they came into Jericho. She hid the spies. And I was going to do some awesome parallels between, her and, because she was cheating. She was breaking the rules. And she was, throwing out signals to the Israelite people with a red cloth. And I was going to do some parallels between them and the Houston Astros, who also cheaters. And they were doing signals for, so the batters knew what pitch was coming. And just so we're on the same page, I completely accept and condone both these situations. I cheat at everything I do, just about. But I also win at most things. And if I was in the World Series like the Houston Astros, I would be cheating. Because one, I'm probably not going to get this opportunity again. It's a World Series. I cheat at cards and checkers with my daughters who are 6. They know you can't trust Dad. He's hiding a card in his pocket. True story. Ready? I was at Sky Zone this week. And that's why I kind of hobbled up on stage, because I'm too old for Sky Zone. But I could still do a front flip on a trampoline. No big deal. Y'all, this will be the time to applause. This is not 145 pounds. And I can still do a front flip and land it. But I was at Sky Zone and we were playing dodgeball. My son's birthday. And so he had a bunch of friends over and we were playing dodgeball. And the ball got thrown at me and it might have grazed my hat. It did. It hit my hat. But it didn't hit me, so I wasn't technically out. Right? Somebody back me up. Hey, it hit my hat. It hit the button on my hat, and I felt it. And like any good member of clergy, any good pastor, I didn't say anything. Because it was down to the finals. I was not going to lose dodgeball to a bunch of kids. So I didn't say anything. and we went on to win. And yeah, no big deal, but we won that dodgeball game. The really bad thing is the person who hit me was Judd Merrill, Pastor Johnny's son. And he hit me, and he kind of looked at me. I was like, what are you going to do? You going to call me a liar in front of all these people? No. But we cheated, and we won, and I am 100% okay with that. This is not where I'm going with this message. But it's important that you know that about me. But I planned on talking about Rahab and, the awesome life that she lived. People believe that she's the great-great-grandmother of King David, which puts her in direct lineage of Jesus on his, earthly side. So this is a great woman who completely changed her ways and did all this amazing stuff for God. And literally, she's the one who hid the Israelite spies when they came. They would have been taken and captured and killed by the king if it wasn't for her. I planned on talking about her until I went to a Drillers game last week. And we were watching the Drillers game, and again, the white dove came down and spoke to me. I had an epiphany. And today I'm going to talk about Joshua. Because at this game I was watching, and I was sitting there, and I was watching this pitcher, and he's doing awesome. He's doing amazing. He's firing them in, striking people out left and right, and just working the corners and doing all this awesome stuff. And then he gets tired. And the more tired he gets, the more wild his throws are. And then he gets wilder and wilder, and he's not doing what he's supposed to be doing. He's not accomplishing the goal that was set before him. Maybe he hits a guy or two, which again, that's something else I'm completely for. You're learning a lot about me today, and it's not all good. Just wait, though, because there's more coming. But then he's not throwing as many strikes. So the coach comes out, talks to him, says, hey, I don't know what he says. This is me making up in my mind. He says, hey, pull it together. You got this. Come on. Infield comes in there. They're talking him up and motivating him, and he pats him on the bottom and walks back to the dugout. And I'm sure between the innings he was getting encouragement from his team, and he's trying his best, and he goes back out there on the mound, and pretty soon he's still not doing what he's supposed to be doing. He's still not accomplishing the goal set before him. So the coach comes out and gives that sign. He taps his arm, points to the bullpen, and here comes a relief pitcher. Here comes somebody to close it. Here comes somebody who can finish it for the team. Because even though the pitcher did amazing up until this point, he couldn't close it. He couldn't finish it. He had to have that relief. So the relief pitcher comes in to complete the job that, everything up to this moment has already been accomplished, and they're doing great things, and he's got to finish it. And that person is Joshua. He comes in to finish the game that Moses had started so long ago. Do this awesome stuff that started so long ago. They'd been in the wilderness for 40 years. Talk about your extra innings. Huh? Yuck, yuck, yuck. Come on. Talk about your extra innings. You don't get it. I'll explain it to you later. Come find me later. Talk about your extra innings. Nothing again. I even tried to say it again to give you all the benefit of the doubt. But hey, Here comes Joshua. And Moses lived this life, this amazing life that was completely devoted to God. And Moses is the one who called the plagues on the people of Egypt. Moses is the one who encountered God through a burning bush, had to remove his shoes because he was on holy ground. This is that Moses who brought down the Ten Commandments, who split the Red Sea for the people to walk across. This is that Moses. And that's the man that Joshua had to come in and relieve. That's the man that Joshua had to close it for. Because even with all of his great feats and all the amazing things that he did, Moses was flawed. He was still a flawed person like the rest of us. And at the end of his life, he starts slipping. And he can't accomplish the goal that was set before. And we see exactly why Joshua had to finish for him in Deuteronomy 32. Starting at 48, it says, "On that same day the Lord spoke to Moses, go up to Mount Nebo in Abiram range in the land of Moab, across from Jericho, and view the land of Canaan I am giving the Israelites as a possession. Then you will die on the mountain that you go up, and you'll be gathered to your people. Just as your brother Aaron died on Mount Hor and was gathered to his people, for both of you broke faith with me among the Israelites at the waters of Meribah Kadesh. And the wilderness of Zin by failing to treat me as holy in their presence. Although from a distance you will view the land that I'm giving the Israelites, you will not go there." So this story that God's referring to, that at Meribah Kadesh, the people of Israel were thirsty and they were out of water. So God says to Moses, "Go and speak to this rock. Go and speak to that rock and call forth water out of it." And Moses was angry, and Moses was mad at the people of Israel because they were just whiners. "Oh, we don't have water in the desert. Boo-hoo." And they're complaining, and he's getting mad, and finally, in anger, he takes his staff and he strikes the rock. And not only does that, he takes some of the credit for himself when the water does come out of the rock. He says, "Must we bring water from this rock?" So he takes some of the credit. And because of this disobedience, because of the pride, because of his flaws, he will never step foot in the promised land. Never step foot in this land that he'd worked for so long. So God has to call somebody else up. And that was Joshua, son of Nun. Not a nun, son of N-U-N, Nun. And he played for, ready for this one? The Promised Land Pirates. Huh? That was good. I came up with that one last night. That was good. Yeah. Moses had got him all the way there. Moses had got him right there on the precipice. And they just needed somebody to come in and close. Take that final step and then take what God had promised him. Because there's people living there already. There are people there. And Joshua had to come up and take what was promised. And he had to do it with a sword. So the people are there. They can see the promised land. They can smell it. They're right there. This is what they've been waiting for this whole time. And this is what they've been preparing for. And they're just waiting for the call. They're waiting for the coach to come in and, pick up the phone in the dugout and call them and say, "Okay, now's your time. Go get it." But they're preparing for it. And that's our first point today. God's preparing you. God prepares you. God is going out and He's preparing. Whether you know it or not, whether you realize it or not, God is preparing you. God tells Joshua, "Go across the Jordan and take what I'm giving you." So Joshua goes to his fighting men. And then Joshua 1:14 says, your wives, dependents, and livestock may remain in the land Moses gave you on this side of the Jordan. But your best soldiers must cross over in battle formation ahead of your brothers and help them. God says, cross over, but cross over and be ready for a fight. And they were ready for a fight. They just spent 40 years preparing. 40 years fighting and learning. Because if they had come straight from Egypt to Canaan, they wouldn't have been prepared. They wouldn't have been prepared for what they were going to face. So it takes them 40 years. They were slaves. You know how to keep a slave a slave? You don't arm it. You don't teach them military tactics. They're probably underfed. They were slaves. So God pulls them from that terrible situation. And they go out and they wander the desert for 40 years, fighting and relying on God and relying on each other. And God the whole time is preparing them. It should have taken weeks at the outside, at the most, taken weeks for them to get from Egypt to Canaan. It's about 526 miles from Egypt to Canaan. It's like my house to Galveston, Texas. I was Googling it last night. I Googled a lot of stuff last night. And it's 537 miles. So I can't even make it all the way to the beach in 526 miles from Egypt to Canaan. That's just depressing for me personally. But it should have taken them weeks, not 40 years. It shouldn't have taken them 40 years, but it needed to take them 40 years. Because the whole time they're preparing. The whole time they're growing closer to each other. The whole time they're growing closer to God. Look, God is preparing you for your calling. God is preparing us for our calling. The trials we go through now are preparing us for our future. The vast amounts of biblical knowledge that I have stored up here prepare me for today. Being humble. I was joking, but I mean, vast amounts of biblical knowledge. My previous life experiences have prepared me for today, for right now. Like I know from my personal life experiences that I cannot trust a teenage boy. In my heart of hearts, I believe that. Paul Washer, he's a pastor, and he was asked one time, somebody said, "What, you don't trust your son?" He said, "No, I don't trust my son. I don't trust his father. Why would I trust my son?" I used to tell my mom, I'm going to go spend the night with somebody. I'm not going to say, I'm going to call him Bob. Because I don't know, like the statute of limitations on some of this stuff. I don't know how we can get in legal trouble. But I'd say, Mom, I'm going to go spend the night with Bob. And Bob would say, I'm going to go spend the night with TJ. And we'd be somewhere else completely. One day, my mother calls Bob's mom and says, "Hey, I need to talk to TJ. She's like, "TJ's not here." Guess who else wasn't there? Bob. Neither of us were there. We were at a third location, undisclosed to anyone, except for the people there. And so I get home, and my mother says, "Where were you? I thought you were going to spend the night with Bob." I say, "Well, yeah, I did. I called Bob's house. You weren't there." I didn't say I was going to be at Bob's house. I said I was going to spend the night with Bob. We were technically at the same party. So, to be honest, I wasn't lying the whole time. But, I mean, Bob was sleeping on the pool table. I was sleeping in a hammock out back. And you're learning way too much about me. And none of that, let me say this before I get hit by lightning. None of that was God's doing. That was not God, trial sent by God for me to grow. That was just me learning from my experiences to deal with a son who's too much like me for his own good. But God's preparing us. And every step we take, God's preparing us. Like the Israelites, if they had went to cross the Jordan before they were prepared, they would have failed. And some of us try to skip that step of preparation and try to just go to where we're called when we're not prepared for it to begin with. We've got to take those steps in preparation. We've got to be getting ready for what God called us to. So the Israelites are preparing, and they're preparing, and they're preparing. They finally get there. And before they cross the Jordan, they send spies. And that's where we meet Rahab. And Rahab played for a team called the Jericho Jezebels. That was good. I had another one. I don't think Lindsay's in here. She said, "Don't say that one." And it's called the Promised Land Prostitutes. She said, "Don't say that one." And those were the better ones, the more appropriate ones that I came up with. But she hides the spies, and once she hides the spies and once they're safe from the king of Jericho, she goes back and she talks to him. She says in Joshua 2, verse 9 and 10 says, "I know that the Lord has given you this land, and the terror of you has fallen on us. And everyone who lives in the land is panicking because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt. And what you did to Sihon and Og, the two Amorite kings, you completely destroyed across the Jordan." Which brings us to our second thought. Our second point. God prepares your way. Whether he's doing it years in advance or he's doing it at that moment, with every step you take, God is preparing your way. You see, the people of Israel, 40 years before they ever got to the Jordan, 40 years before they could even see the Promised Land, the people of Jericho were hearing rumors about them. The people of Jericho were hearing these crazy guys just walked across a sea. They're hearing about the plagues in Egypt, about a God who can split the sea. They're saying, what kind of God is this? How great is this God? They hear about the battles they fight, and they get more and more wary. Because in their heads, these Israelites just get bigger and bigger with every story they hear, with every battle they win. They're walking through the desert. They don't have water or food. What kind of God provides water and food for them? That's amazing. They're defeating people left and right. Bitter water. They come up to it and throw a stick in it, and it's no longer bitter. What kind of power do they have? And they're headed here? Good. And then when the people finally get to the Jordan, God does it again. God dries the Jordan so they can walk across on dry land. So it just scares the people of Jericho even more. What are we stepping into? What's coming for us? Every step of the way, God is preparing a way for them. Look, if God is calling you for something, He's preparing you for something. If God's calling you something, He's preparing you at the same time. And He's preparing a way for you. God prepared everything in advance for the Israelites. And the people of Jericho, they're nervous. And then one day they can see them. They're on the walls. They can see these people of Israel, these crazy dudes who are 9 feet tall and shoot lasers out of their eyes. And they're like, ooh, gosh. And they see them make camp, and they see them come out of their camp and walk out, and they walk around the city of Jericho. Like, well, that wasn't too bad. Because they just walked back to their camp. And then they come back again the next day. They walk out and they march out of their camp and they walk around the city of Jericho. And they walk back to their camp. For 6 days, the people of Israel walk out of their camp, march around the city of Jericho, and march back. And each day, more and more people from Jericho come up and stand on the wall and watch them. And they're like, what are they doing today, Bob? They're just walking around the city again. It's an unusual tactic. Let's see if it plays off. Let's see how well it turns out. Just walking around the city. The Israelite people were doing that because that's what God had told them to do. And this is the God that had parted the Red Sea. This is the God that had dried up the Jordan. This is the God that turned that bitter water sweet. So if God says walk around a city, they're going to walk around a city. They're trusting God is going to prepare a way for them. They're trusting God who had prepared them this whole time. Then on the 7th day, they come out. Walk around the city of Jericho once. And then they started again. Twice. 3 times. People of Jericho are like, whoa, something new. And they walk around 7 times. And they blow their trumpets. And when they blow their trumpets, they cry out. And the walls come down. The walls crash down. And the Israelites are able to take the city. I want to fast forward just a little bit. I'm going to come back. I know you all are like, but what happens to the people of Jericho? I'll get back to it. We'll circle back around. I want to fast forward to another example of God preparing a way. When Joshua was fighting the Amorites, in Joshua 10 verse 5 says, so the Amorite kings, the kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon, joined forces, advanced with all their armies, besieged Gibeon, and fought against it. And so Joshua comes to the aid of Gibeon. And against 5 armies, he prevails. He comes out on top against 5 armies. And in order to do this, God makes the sun stand still in the sky. Makes the sun stand still in the sky. And if that's not amazing enough, he calls down hail. And the hail was so great that it killed more people than the Israelite swords did in this battle. That's the God that's calling you. That's the God that's preparing a way for you to succeed where you're called. Because God's preparing you and He's preparing a way for you. So if He's doing that, if He's preparing a way for you and He's preparing you, then it's going to be easy. Right? Who said no? Why wouldn't it be? It's God's preparing you and He prepared a way for you. It's going to be easy. No, it's not going to be easy. If you listened to Cody's message last week, you should. It was adequate. I'm just kidding. It was awesome. And I tell the band or the worship team every time they come off, Megan will be walking back into the lobby, and she's just covered in sweat. And I'll say, hey, well, it's adequate. I mean, there's room to grow. I don't want them to get a big head, and I want them to always strive to be better, so I keep them grounded. So I say, hey, it was good, or better. But I haven't really. They are one of the best worship teams that there is around. But God calls you, and when God calls you, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Both these scenarios that Joshua is in, they're different. They're unique situations. I don't want to say weird, because I don't want to say what God does is weird. But looking at it, like, well, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But one of them, Joshua, for you guys. Joshua is standing in front of a city up on a hill with giant walls around it. And God says, there you go. I've given you Jericho. Like, there's still a wall around it. There's still angry dudes inside of it who are going to hurt me. And then when he's fighting 5 armies, 5 kings and their armies are behind him. And they're coming after him. And God says, there you go. I've given you these 5 armies to destroy. You're welcome. I find it unique. I find it different. There's 5 armies around him. He's like, we're surrounded. We can just throw a sword in any direction and hit somebody. It's good. There's a famous Marine. Every Marine alive knows who he is, Chesty Puller. And Chesty Puller was the most decorated Marine in the history of the Marine Corps. He was in World War II, and he was in Korea, and he was just this crazy guy. And he's got all these quotes, and one of them is when he was in the Chosin Reservoir, completely surrounded by Koreans. And he sends a message to, his higher-ups. He sends a radio transmission. He says, well, we're surrounded. And that simplifies things. You can shoot in any direction and hit somebody. That's the situations that Joshua's given. That's the situations that Joshua gets. He's like, yeah, there's 5 armies, but they're right there. You can just go kill them. Yeah, there's a walled city, but it's just a walled city. It's easy. Simplifies it. They're not moving. But Joshua still had to take that city. Joshua still had to defeat those armies. That's our third point. You still have to work for it. God's going to call you to something. You still have to work for it. You still have to put forth effort for it. Joshua had to take those cities. The walls came tumbling down, like in the song. The walls came tumbling down. But behind those walls were angry men who wanted to do him harm. God made the sun stand still when he was fighting the Amorites. But he didn't say, hey, this is a great opportunity for me to take a break. Sun standing still, I'll get a little bit extra time. I'm going to go grab a coffee, take a $5. No, He still had a job to do. God gave him the opportunity, and he still had to take it. Look, if God called me to be a great evangelist, this Billy Graham, share the gospel with the world, I would have to share the gospel. If I want to spiritually lead my home, I have to grow spiritually. I can't affect the people around me in a positive way if I'm on the same level as they are. I've got to be working towards something. I've got to be working to make myself better. In a world that's more and more hostile to our way of life, to the Christian beliefs, if I want to be able to defend my beliefs to people, I'm going to have to understand and know the Bible. I'm going to have to work for it. I'm going to have to take it. I'm going to have to put in the time and the effort. The Israelites were completely prepared, and God had gone before him, but they still had to take what God had given them. They still had to work for it. What is God preparing you for? What is God preparing you for, and what are you doing to make it happen? What are you doing to make it happen?